morning, everyone. This is Abhinav Agarwal, and welcome to the latest iteration of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. I'll spare you the drill. We have two writing pieces for today. One is a book review. And without any further ado, I will turn this over to you, Otis.
Okay. That was what was that? That was like the trimmed down, light and fast. They have these two theories of climbing. Climbing the big mountains like the Himalayas. There's either you go with all your gear, you're going here, you go here, you go here, or you just do light and fast. That was like the light and fast version.
Yeah, I think after 50 sessions, I think pretty much we can do that without the intro bit.
Yeah, right. Please review past tapes if you want to hear all of the introductory information.
Yes. If
Okay,
I'm mellifluous
so
voice. Okay, yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
I have Abhinav. I have your daughter's review, and she's not here yet, right? So
Yeah, she should be here in a bit. She's just chosen the most convenient or coincidental moment to just disappear for a bit. She'll be back, I think, in 10, 15 minutes.
okay, very understandable. But this is a common amongst us writers is that already we're writers, right? So clearly we don't like to dive into situations too much. We like to
Actually, no,
hold
she's,
ourselves.
yeah, so, okay, so she's camera shy. So she's going to sit here and I'll take the headset off so that, we can all, so she can also hear you.
Okay, great. Well, let's start with her piece then, and then we have Ashvani and we have this review. So let's start with this, and then she can, if she wants, she can disappear for Ashvani's piece, which I don't blame her, right, Ashvani? Let's share a screen for our lengthy discussion of all of Ashvani's failures.
Look forward to it.
Okay, so did I share my screen here? Okay, great. Annika, right? So I think, can I hear your background? I hear someone's background. Ashvani. Abhinav, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Were you saying anything that we should be?
No. I was just responding that yes, I could see your screen.
Oh, okay, great. So, Annika, this let's have. Oh, will she read a little bit of it?
Yeah, she will. She will.
Sure. Okay.
Well, let's. I don't know what. I guess just to maybe. Sorry, I've got some. Let's read this a little bit. Okay, I made a little yellow line, so just 1, 2, 3, the first 4 paragraphs would be great.
Okay. So I got this book for my birthday, and from the blurb, it seemed like a typical thriller murder mystery, and I was sort of right. You'll soon see why. Right off the bat, I immediately got a Strangers on a Train vibe, which is one of the most chilling movies I've ever seen, but I'm getting off topic here. Two complete strangers that happen to end up in the same place start up a conversation, a seemingly casual conversation that ends up altering their lives forever. Lily Hayward is an enigmatic stranger that Ted Sevison can't help but open up to. Every personal detail about his life and his marital problems are spilled in a second. Even his darkest secret, that he never imagined he would ever reveal, comes out in front of Lily, the beautiful stranger he's inexplicably drawn to. Lily talks little and unveils even less about herself, hence making her the ideal audience. The conversation seems innocent enough. However, it takes a dark turn when Lily offers to put an end to Ted's problem once and for all. Ted, though initially shocked, quickly realizes she's serious. The more he thinks about it, the more entranced he gets. Soon he is unable to refuse. Together, Lily and Ted began hatching a plan to solve this problem.
All right, great, thank you. Well, I think it's great that you read and you can clearly write about it. So I think this review is great. You also do a wonderful job of not being a spoiler, basically, throughout this entire review. I mean, given the genre, I think you do a fantastic job of that. There, I think the way you describe what happens in the book is great. What follows is almost like a game of chess. Every player has a game. Every player in the game has something to lose, some more than others, but something is at stake for everyone. I mean, you clearly understand the structure of these stories. You must be reading quite a lot of them, and you have a lot of language that you use to describe how these sort of murder mysteries take part, and you understand the dramatic elements of the book. That's all really great. Players are sacrificed, but it's all a smokescreen. Nobody sees the real game. I mean, that's that there describes all writing and all books that are done well. So that's exactly right. Like, the writer is always writing this story, but we have some other, we have this other game that's being played out. We get the reader to be myopically involved in what's happening in the moment, but we have a kind of master plan. So we writers are should be really good at that sort of devious construction. The real vicious cutthroat game between the two queens, one that could only end with one of them dead. I mean, I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. Nobody sees the real game, the real vicious cutthroat game between the two queens. I mean, you got me. I'm ready. I think you do a nice job of setting up, a very positive beginning in the review. And then I wasn't sure if you meant to write confusion or conclusions. Anyway, I was a little unclear about that. There are a couple like little tiny editorial issues that are very small. You write very well. You write clear, crisp sentences. I'll make a little plug for looking at Strunk and White's advice about commas. So I actually didn't learn any of these things until I was in graduate school because I was terrible at grammar. I didn't like it. I just like to write, so that was my main thing. But I learned them when I had to teach composition at the university level. So I learned things about comma splices, which there are a couple in here. I mean, it's just like these little agonizing things. I used to say, like, if you have these kind of little grammar issues, this is like my sweeping thing to say. And I think it's true of all life. If you have a problem and you don't do something specifically to address that problem, you still have that problem. So like little things like comma splices will turn up until you decide, I'm going to learn and figure out what a comma splice is. There was another one here, but I forget what it is. But I marked them. They're not a big deal. Yeah. What I mean, honestly, I think that writing is horribly taught generally, where grammar teachers, English teachers, in order to feel better about themselves, deal with the micro issues that they've learned themselves, spelling and grammar, completely immaterial. What I see here in this work is, Annika, you go for it. I mean, you can write sentences and you keep those fingers moving and you're typing stuff. That is I believe, according to me, that's the basis of great writing, being able to let it flow. As someone said, writing is easy. You just open a vein. I love that expression. And I think that, Annika, you're showing that here. I feel like you write, you open a vein, you have tremendous facility with language. micro issues and the obsession with them is ridiculous. But at the same time, there are things that we want to deal with because we don't want them to get in our way later on. So we dispatch them. This was a little advice that I would really like to see you maybe develop and bring into this work as just a test piece, because this is what we writers do, is we're always writing test pieces. We might publish some of those test pieces, and that's fine, but we might not. But everything we write is useful for us, and it's an experiment as we develop our craft. So with this review, you could easily send this out, now. But something that you might want to incorporate into your review process is your ability to bring yourself into the review. And I thought that this was an area that you might be able to do that. So you write, the twists themselves were slightly underwhelming. I think that's great, a great description. They just seemed like they were thrown in at random points to add some complication to the story. That's great. Then you write, the result was messy and sort of puzzling instead. So the reason I stopped on this one was that I just wanted to emphasize that the result for you was messy, right?
Oh,
Like your perception of the book, like there's something going on in your head,
yeah.
you're puzzled. And I think that subjective interpretation is a very powerful thing to include in a review, but it's also just a great thing to access for us writers generally. We want to come to the self because actually returning to the self is where all our knowledge really is based. It isn't really objective knowledge. It's a kind of subjective knowledge that we interpret within ourselves. So as you're reading it, basically what happens is you become sort of confused. You're feeling that it's sort of messy. And then you come up with these great phrases that the effect was underwhelming. They seem to be thrown at random points. To acknowledge that it's based on your experience can be great. So, like I sort of invented in my mind a sentence like this. For me, there was a lack of crispness and exactitude, right? For me, there was a lack of crispness and exactitude. Admitting that it's for you, very powerful for like writers. They say, according to the Greeks, we have ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is this sort of authoritarian persona that we have, the thing that people trust. Pathos is emotion, show, don't tell. Logos is logic, and the way I see logic is narrative logic. This follows this, follows this, follows this. Those are, according to Aristotle, those are like the three keys to powerful writing. If you ask me, the most powerful of those three is ethos. If your reader trusts you, then you can basically say anything. You can make people believe the emotions of anything, and you can make people believe logic that can be extremely faulty if you have ethos. Bringing yourself in contributes to your ethos because it's showing that you recognize that you're not talking about objective truth, you're actually talking about subjective interpretation. So I would suggest trying to add that to your review work as you go on. You either do it here, fine. If you do it, you don't, that's whatever. But in the future, do try and bring yourself into it a little bit. For me, there was a lack of crispness and exactitude that made me puzzled and feel that the prose were messy, right? But I mean, that's just like, that's right. That's just really crisp and strong. This book, despite all of its good qualities, was missing the moment that makes you gasp. What a great line. That's really, really good. That's really good. It lacked the one thing that turns a good murder mystery thriller into a phenomenal one. That's fantastic. Little micro issue. I'll say this to everyone, as almost everyone here knows: beware of starting sentences with it. Beware of starting sentences with there was, but definitely it, because pronouns depend on antecedents, and a lot of times, particularly paragraphs too, we don't have an antecedent for that it when we read it. It's a micro issue, but we can just jump into whatever the it was. And in this case, I don't know what it was, and we don't want the reader not to know what we're talking about. I might have liked a little more exactitude here, because I actually think that this is another place where you are kind of bringing yourself into it, but you resist it, so it becomes unclear what you're saying. But you write, Lily was by far one of the best written characters. I don't know what that means exactly, because writing characters is a... Oh, do you want to, Annika, you want to say?
I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't really remember what I was thinking when I wrote that, but I felt like she was a really good character. Like, it was one of the positive parts of the book, the characters themselves.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, the way I interpreted it, okay, so I'm going back into, because I definitely see our experiences of things, including what we read, is basically being our experiences. And it seems to me what you might be saying is that you connected mostly with this character of Lily. You found her a great character. It's like when I was young, I found Raskolnikov, I shouldn't admit it, but I found Raskolnikov such an intriguing character, right? He was a character that I identified with. And I think that that's a little bit what you're saying. You're not really talking about the craft of writing here, because if you say best written characters, that suggests that you're talking about the writing of the character. But I think you're really talking about the effect of the character on you. And you felt that the character was complex and neither exactly good nor bad. And you identified with a character like that. And I think that that's true, because we as human beings, we don't know ourselves as being, I am solely good, right? I am solely bad. We don't really know ourselves that way, though other people may see us that way. So it does seem to me that you identify with that character, and I think that that would be a great addition. It's you in this review, you are sort of putting at bay the idea of including yourself in the review, and I know that a lot of people, writing teachers, teach that we should not include I, for example, and I almost can't speak about the way writing is taught mostly. But anyway, I think that you should include yourself. When you include yourself, that increases the ethos of your work. Admitting that you're a human being and involved in the work is exactly what you're communicating to other human beings. You're talking to them about how they may interact with the work. So using yourself in the piece, I think, is definitely appropriate. And I know that there are going to be your teachers that, are going to disagree with me, and you can have them send me an email. Or talk on the phone. Okay, so we're talking about murder. Murder comes easy to her. So this is one of the reasons we don't like to say I sympathize with this character. Murder comes easy to her. But like I said, so she has a twisted brand of logic which she uses to justify her motives. Okay, so this is what really made me think of Crime and Punishment, because when I read Crime and Punishment the first or second or third time, there's a word in there called casuistry. Okay, no one ever uses this word. I've never heard the word spoken, but I read it in Crime and Punishment. Casuistry is exactly what you're describing here, to have a kind of twisted logic that justifies your actions. So that's why I wrote casuistry. Wow, I love when that comes up. And then my only other comment here was, and this maybe has to do with sort of reading and our experiences with reading. So you write at one point that the ending is ambiguous.
Yeah.
So I think I just actually, and that's a fine thing to say, but I wanted to add sort of like a perception of how, stories work, and a little bit of there is a kind of difference between two things. So I was once in a workshop with a writer named Bob Shakochis, so I have to credit him with saying this. One of the people in the workshop, it's a graduate level workshop, said, "Excuse me, your stories," saying to Bob Shakochis, your stories seem to end kind of ambiguously." And Bob Shakochis, he's just like, "My stories don't end ambiguously." He said, "My stories end when everything that follows is inevitable." Okay, so he said that. I've never written it down, but I've always remembered it. And that was 25 years ago. Burn that into your mind.
Yeah.
I'm saying this to you, Annika, because I know that you're not only going to write reviews, that you're going to write other things, and you're going to write stories yourself, and you're going to have a writing career, right? So this idea of finding your ending when everything else is inevitable, in writing, we don't ever want to write anything that's not surprising. The way we write is we build anticipation, and then we surprise the reader with what does happen. We build anticipation for what they think is going to happen, and then we surprise them with what actually happens. This is the magic power of storytellers. So you can see that stopping your story when everything that follows is inevitable makes sense, because you never want to write what's inevitable, right? You never want to write what's expected. The other way I sometimes think of this is that we develop our storytelling rhythm in essentially, I'm going to say 4 beats. Okay, so writing and storytelling and poetry and song and all of these things develop out of certain natural cycles. And I'm just going to use the 4-beat one because it's the same as the beating of the heart. This is our rhythm. And the way I sometimes discuss endings is we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ending goes 1, 2, 3. The 4th beat is for the reader. If you've ever seen the cartoon with Wile E. Coyote, the Bugs Bunny cartoon, the coyote is chasing the roadrunner, and at the end of every one, the coyote ends up off the cliff. Yeah. That's the place that a very, very good writer wants to leave their reader. They're off the cliff. They turn around. They see the roadrunner, right? They have a moment of awakening that they are off the cliff. We don't have them fall. We want to stop when they go off the cliff and then turn around and see the roadrunner staring at them. So I'm just saying that being about endings. Now I'm going to say that there are endings that shut the door on the story. Okay, to me, this is an old style of storytelling. One in which you might know the idea of Deus ex machina. Deus ex machina is a literary idea where it actually comes out of, I love this, obviously it's Deus ex machina, it's Greek, but it's coming from a period in Italian theater, sort of Renaissance Italian theater, or maybe even pre-Renaissance, where you would have a play and then the god would descend from the wings on, I always picture like a little moon, and they'd be sitting there and they'd be dressed in their godly like things. And they would explain to us what happened and what was going to happen, and basically shut the door on the story. That tradition of the Deus ex machina, like the kind of the way I think of it is shutting the door. It's like if we're doing those beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, crescendo 4, right? It's like shutting the door on the story. That continued even in Ashvani's favorite type of story, the O. Henry story. So I'm not here trying to, murder the O. Henry story once and for all, but it's an antiquated form in which the O. Henry story shuts the door with some obvious irony that that we then take away as basically the nugget of truth of the story. Just like the Deus Ex Machina tells us what's true about the story, the O. Henry story also ends with this sense of like an absolutely definitive ending, and so-and-so was murdered and it meant that justice was served and blah, 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 blah. Hamlet, Fortinbras coming in at the end is kind of an O. Henry ending. If you know Hamlet, the killing is happening. I mean, it's wonderful, this mix of, life and death and actualizing the self in death. Hamlet, brilliant for that. But then when everyone is dead and gone, Fortinbras comes in, and order is restored. It's like an O. Henry ending. Thank you, Ashvani, for coming and putting on your video to accept this diatribe of mine against O. Henry endings. So Annika, I'm just saying that to give you a little idea of where, yes, there is a feeling of ambiguity, but is it a feeling of ambiguity because the writer has ended when everything that follows is inevitable and therefore creates that feeling of, I think at first when we're reading literary works that leave us off the cliff, we don't like it that much. We're like, Annika, there's some stories that do that to the extreme. Is there this an American writer, Flannery O'Connor? Read her short stories. Read A Good Man is Hard to Find. A Good Man is Hard to Find was my introduction to a story in which I was like, what? What? What are you talking about? What happened? Read that story, and then some of these kind of ideas might make a little more sense. But anyway, I'm throwing that at you because I don't know how the story ends, and I don't know, maybe it was just a weak ending. That could be, or maybe it was intentionally meant to be sort of a, that 1, 2, 3, and then leaving that fourth beat off because it was an inevitable happening. So you'll have to judge that for yourself in terms of evaluating it. But I think it's fantastic work. I see that you're both a reader and a writer. So as far as I'm concerned, you have no problems in the world.
Thank you.
Life's good then.
Life is good. Life is very, very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions, Annika?
No, not right now.
Okay. No questions.
Oh yeah. Well, here's Ashvani going to come and try and support his O. Henry ending. Yes, Ashvani.
No, I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to say that on this question of the ending of the story, there's a story by Jeffrey Archer called, I think it's called One Man's Meat, and with stops after that to leave you guessing what the story is about. But the story doesn't have one ending. It has got 4 endings. So he says one is burnt, one is rare, one is well done, and one is a point. And he says you can take whichever one you like. All 4 are plausible endings. All 4 fit into the story. And the reader is left to decide which one he wants to take.
Okay. I accept that, Ashwani. I don't, it sounds like, there's this thing about the writer, the relationship between the writer and the reader and our ability to trust the reader. And I think that kind of has a bearing on this. It's like we the writer can't control what the reader feels. And we're not really trying to articulate truth so much as create an experience, a moving experience. I don't think it's for us to say, I don't believe it's for us to say, this is true, this isn't true. I don't think we're going to be able to do that, for humanity, to end all argument with what is right and just, et cetera, et cetera. And I think instead we have to kind of trust the reader we have to let the reader go, in a sense. We have them for the story, but at a certain point we have to let them go and trust that if we've been crafty, we end up creating an emotional experience which doesn't really have any language or words. Your writer with 4 endings sounds a little bit like they're trying to retain control. They're understanding that they can't have complete control, but they're trying to retain control. So they're like, okay, I know that I'm not supposed to retain complete control and I can't say exactly what's true. So my compromise is going to be, I'm going to give you 4 endings. We see this. Anyway, Ashvani, let's move on to your piece. I don't think we're going to decide all this today. Maybe can I have you read these from, actually just so we can just understand our location down to here. Do you see that, Ashwani?
Yes. Can I start?
Yes, please.
Ganesh stopped outside the temple steps while Shiva used the support railing to go up to the 7 steps to the entrance. Once near the sanctum sanctorum and away from Ganesh's view, he broke down. Keeping close to one side wall so as not to block the other's path, he listlessly collapsed on the floor, both his knees on the ground and the right side of his body reposing against the wall, his shoulders slumped and quivering as he sobbed soundlessly. He clutched the walking stick upright with both his sweaty palms, its ferrule resting on the floor between his knees and his left cheek touching the stick almost sensuously. Presently, he looked up towards the bigger-than-life idol of Lord Shiva, after whom he had been named at birth, and looked at the idol's eyes. But despite all his efforts, Shiva could not lock his glance with the idol's. On other days, he had always been able to look into the idol's eyes and establish a contact. But today, the Lord would not look him in his eyes. He gave up and spoke tenderly to his Lord, forgiving him for not meeting his glance, for bringing his life to such a pass, for forcing him out of his own house, for taking Uma away from him, for leaving him behind alone, for giving him a son who thought a senior citizen home was better than his own home for his father. His voice was devoid of any rancor, although a sporadic sniffle punctuated his long-winded drivel to his Lord. At long last, he fell silent, all his grievances expressed to his full satisfaction, albeit with none of them redressed. He closed his eyes and wondered if he was in the 4th state of Turiya or pure consciousness, away from wakefulness, sleep, or dreaming.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Ashwani, you, if you do have an interest, I would try and direct you to read Flannery O'Connor. Have you read her?
I've just the other day got that book, but haven't read it yet.
Okay.
Short stories.
She is interestingly, she was Catholic, and a lot of people talk about her, as being a kind of a Catholic writer because her Catholicism influences her Catholic worldview influences her writing so much. I don't generally find it necessary to include sort of ideology with someone's writing, because the writing is the writing. You know, it's either working, and it is working universally. It doesn't matter how it's not an ideological conception. A story is a thing beyond ideology, I feel. But anyway, I think you might find it interesting. There's a story called story I love there. To Annika, I was suggesting A Good Man is Hard to Find, but the story that this reminds me of is called Parker's Back, which is just a wonderful story. I mean, the issues of, you know, human striving, which then includes, you know, our relationship to spirituality, is universal, and I don't know, you know, I find this story very moving. I was entranced by it. You know, we again, you know, Ashwani, we again get to your, you know, bailout endings. You know, I had a teacher, when you read Parker's Back, look at the ending. So I had a teacher that gave me this good advice. He said, begin in action, end lyrically. I think that makes good sense, because the lyrical ending, right, the song lyric, the imagistic quality of it, that we usually combine imagery and obviously when we're reading, we have the sound of the language in our ears. So we're basically, you know, combining sort of imagistic music. Makes sense, because going back to this idea that we're not actually trying to come up with a meaning, we're not trying to shut the door on our story. We're trying to lift the reader to this point of, I'll call it suspension. When the coyote goes off the cliff, we end there, because do they go up or do they go down? We don't know, but we take them there and allow the reader to understand where they might go, or not even where they might go, but to feel that moment of something. It's an inarticulate moment. And I think that's why that teacher of mine was suggesting, honestly, he was something of a hack. Great guy, I loved him, but you know, he was a kind of a hack. And so he came up with this idea of how to do it, basically. But I think the reason behind why it works is because the imagistic ending, the lyrical ending, allows us to feel that sense of suspension at the end of our story. And that feeling of suspension, that feeling of either we can ascend or descend, depending on how it's been going, according to the inevitability of how it's been going, the ascension being kind of a Hollywood ending, the descension being a tragic ending, right? That feeling is the thing that the writer is finally giving to the reader. That is our gift to them, creating that moment of possibility to either ascend or perhaps tragically descend. That's what we're giving to our reader. And that, I think, is a noble calling. And I only want you to take it to that level. Just that little extra step. You're doing everything else, I feel. I mean, you're patient. You are a wonderful humanist. I mean, you know, and I mean that in that you understand, you know, I think this character here, you understand the difficulty of this character, you know, and it's just this little next thing that I want you to experiment with. Just think about it as the lyrical ending. You don't have to say or read Parker's Back. It's a spectacular. Flannery O'Connor maybe shuts the door a little bit in that. You'll see. But in a complex way. So I love this story. I don't know what you do. Ashwani, tell me what you do. Do you just write these stories like every week? Is it just a new thing? You just type it out? Is this a first draft? Are you working on things? Tell me about what your process is.
No, I've got one project going on, which I told you about a long time back, about short stories related to death, a sort of exemplum kind of a thing. But the other thing is that whenever I have any idea, I just jot it down on a small notebook kind of a thing. And then in my writing folder, I have a folder called projects, where I just, will open a Word document and write that idea. It may be just 2 or 3 words or a sentence, which just lies there till, I have time to. Now I open out whenever I have time and I want to write, I take out one of those and develop that idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to start publishing these pieces. So I think, Abhinav and some of the rest of us, you need to think about where you might send them. I think there are places in the, maybe a little bit of polish, and then also arriving maybe at an ending that sort of, takes the reader someplace where they haven't been before, which is our idea, take them someplace new, not shut the door in their face. Let me open the door and then shut it in your face. You're not coming in here. But
I'm scared if I leave it like that, then somebody like Anika will say this is an unambiguous ending and reject it.
She will. No. You need to send it out some places, get some of these pieces ready, send them out. And I think you could send them to some journals in the US. But I would love for you to have a venue through Indica and in India. And I think that we'd absolutely have to start a journal, where you can publish some poetry, maybe, in various literary forms, poetry, essay, nonfiction, and fiction, so that you have a venue for some of your work and some of the work that everyone is developing for publishing. And maybe those places and those journals already exist, and if they do, great, send them to those places. But if they don't exist, then let's make one, because your work is very, very good.
Thank you, Otis. Thank you.
And it really deserves to be shared with a wider audience. So
I'll drink to that after this session.
What's that?
I said after this session I'll have a drink to that.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that those are our pieces for today. Vandana, do I have your piece? Vandana, can you jump on for a second? I'm not sure if she's there. But anyway, I think Abhinav, a little the pieces.
Hello.
Oh, hi. Did you send me a piece this week?
Yes, I had sent you the piece last week, and I'd sent it again this Saturday.
Right, I saw that with two endings. So right, so Saturday is a little bit too late for me to be able to read.
I know. I'm really very sorry about it.
Okay, so I wasn't able to get to it, and it's a little bit better to send it to me by about noon on Fridays, because then Friday afternoon I do the work during the time period that I think that I'm doing my work, and then on Saturday I basically spend with my family, so I don't have time to read during that period.
Sure.
I have to compartmentalize like we all have to in our lives, and I'm lucky to be able to do so. So we'll talk about that one next week, and then I'll make my notes and I'll send it back to you, and then hopefully we'll have some more. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Otis, and thank you, Ashwani, for sending in your piece. And hopefully, next week we'll get to view and hear your comments on Vandana's piece also, and looking forward to pieces from other people also. And as always, we'll put this recording up on YouTube. So I think there are 50 or 51 sessions, of which we have recordings on the YouTube channel, and this will get added there.
Okay, great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.